Father in heaven. And isn't it interesting that Jesus himself said, I only ever do that which I see my Father doing. His spirit was lined up with God, and his will was in line with God perfectly. Isn't that awesome? It's that we can have the mind of Jesus. It's that whatever situation, and then it takes over the body. So every choice that you make begins with your spirit. So when you're deciding, as I've been talking to some of the older teens recently that are looking at, they're going to be leaving energy and they're going to be going off to doing other things. That decision-making process has to come from the Spirit. And the funny thing is that when we are listening to the Spirit, the Spirit, is that the wisdom that comes from that place can sometimes be very contradictory to the natural wisdom that comes from the soul. Sometimes God tells us to do things that just don't make sense. God told Jesus to get some mud, spit in it, and then rub it in some bloke's eye, and he gets healed. That's not natural wisdom. So I just want to encourage you really, with that in mind, with that background, that you understand how important it is that we as people be people of the Spirit. That's kingdom people. That's what John has been teaching us about for the last couple of years. That's what the keys to the kingdom are about. It's about being people of the Spirit. Having said all that, this is what I'm going to just finally get you to think about. I've got some great verses down here, so I just got distracted there. Here you go. Do you know I said to you that verse in Peter? That our soul is under constant attack? 1 Peter 2 verse 11. 1 Peter 2 verse 11. Dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. Now, here we come to the stuff about worship. Worship is a spirit activity. It's a spirit activity. It's not about just singing songs, those kind of things. It has to come from a spirit place. If you have a Bible, I'd like you to go to John chapter 4. I've got a wonderful new Bible I'm looking at the moment. This is today's New International Version. Big chunky one. There you go. 17 quid from Amazon. John chapter 4. Verse 23. This is the woman at the well. Jesus is talking to a Samaritan woman. In those days, that was a no-no for two reasons. First of all, they were Samaritans. They were hated by the Jews. And B, she was a woman. Jewish men weren't meant to be talking to women on their own. In fact, they weren't really meant to be talking to women. So Jesus says this to her. Verse 23, yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers, say true. So does that mean, therefore, that there are false worshippers? Playing the game well. When the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. You worship God in the Spirit. Now, this got me thinking. I wonder how much worship takes place in the church around the world that isn't Spirit-led. It doesn't come from the Spirit. It comes from the soul. It's about feeling. It's about thinking. It's not stuff that is necessarily wrong in and of itself. But we need to be people that worship in the Spirit, from our spirits. How do we know? Well, one of the things that I've noticed in the church in the recent months is the songs that really seem to just take off are the ones that are all about Jesus. The ones that are all about Jesus. And I'm grateful in many ways to some of the stuff that I've experienced at Kingdom Faith back in April, March, something like that. Neil, myself, Wendy and John Steer, we went down to the Kingdom Faith Leaders Conference in Horsham. And it was a powerful time of worship. But the worship was all about Jesus. It wasn't picking songs and churning through songs and the musicians using their ability to put on a performance. That's the soul. How many times have you been to a concert, as John has pointed out, a Robbie Williams gig? It's soulish. It's all coming from the soul, from feelings, from emotions, from the head. But what we did was that it came from our spirit. It was all about Jesus. It was looking at Jesus. It was glorifying Jesus. It was worshipping Jesus. It was declaring the truth of what God had done for us through Jesus. It was celebrating and reaffirming and bringing clarity in our minds about who we are as children of God through the work of Jesus. Does that make sense? And it excited me. I remember a few years ago when John, myself and a couple of others, we went up to Faith Camp for the first time. We just drove up for the day. We're just going to have a look round, see if it might be something that we could bring the rest of the church to. And we went to the... hands up those of you who have actually been to Faith Camp. Just put your hands up for me. Most of you, okay. Well, we went to the main cattle shed for the main meeting. Thankfully, there weren't any cattle there. And I've got to be honest with you. It was such hard work for me. And I moaned about it to John. John was very gracious, as he always is. He said, you just have to persevere with things, James. It's that kind of thing, really. And I was quite provoked, really. And I realised that they weren't singing the songs they were singing I didn't know. I thought melodically they were weak. I didn't like the structure of them. It seemed to be very repetitious. It just drove me nuts. I'll be honest with you, and some of you have thought the same, so don't sit there and say you haven't. But my point was that I was approaching worship from my soul. I wanted to feel good. I wanted to give me a little tingle up the spine. I'd come from a background of teaching and worship that said it's all about relationship, it's about lovey Jesus, it's about cuddles, it's about being intimate, and it is in some kind of ways about those things. But fundamentally, if we worship God from our souls, we will always be prone to be affected by how we feel. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter how I feel. And the moment that you allow your feelings or your thoughts, I don't like this song, it annoys me, it's got an irritating melody, blah, 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 you will never be able to worship because it's coming from the soul. Now, Jesus said, true worshippers worship in the Spirit. So if I'm offering soulish worship, it's not worship. And what I love in the church at the moment is it feels, and I think what's happening is that we are starting to worship in spirit. We're worshipping in spirit. You know, I've got some amazing musicians that work with me on this team. Do you know we could put on a great performance every week? I mean, Kat's got a degree in something, and John, John's performed with stuff, and Tim plays things, and it's just amazing. We could do it from the soul. We could, and I know, I was talking to John Pike recently, and I know that some of the stuff that he's been involved with in the past, that's what it's been. It's been a performance. It's been about hyping up the crowd. It's about wheeling out that song and driving it and making it happen and turning it into something that it isn't. And I want to encourage us that worship is a spirit activity. John chapter 4, verse 23. Worship, that was the first point. Number 2, worship is all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. And the songs, particularly at the moment, that are causing this outbreak of spirit worship are the songs about Jesus. Does that mean we never sing songs about ourselves? No. Sometimes we use the Psalms of lament. Sometimes the Psalms of repentance. There is a place for singing about ourselves. But I don't want to stay there. I don't want to stay there. I want to take my eyes off myself and off my problems and off my situation, and I want to turn my eyes upon Jesus. Because when I do that, it